What is up, teacher friends? My name is Poet Tim Staley. Actually, it's just Tim Staley. I throw the poet in there to make myself sound self-important. I'm here to tell you today about how you might teach Dante's Inferno. So, folks, I started my 12th grade senior English class with Inferno. So we started school last week, and when the students first came in, I said, we're going to hell. And I enjoyed making that joke. I enjoyed making hell jokes all week. I told students at the beginning of my class to engage their heldar. This was like a radar, but just for the word hell. So for 48 hours, students went in the world and they listened for hell, and they heard it. They heard the word hell and hell adjacent words because hell is embedded into American culture. For example, I'm wearing a shirt today, Arizona State. Sun Devils. That's the devil's pitchfork right there. So I mean, even in this college is hell is got a heldar. My heldar is going off right here. So the first step was to make some jokes about we're going to hell. That sounded fun on the first day. I like that. Second joke, or second thing was to have them just listen for hell, and they heard it. They heard it in softball practices, volleyball practices. They heard it in their TV shows. They saw it in their books. They saw it in their cell phones, and they reported that to me, and we made a list of all the different hells, and we talked about it. We also took some time on the board to think about all the different types of hell. Like we made some categories. So there's sort of that like Christian hell. There's the metaphorical hell. There's the cartoon hell, like in the afterlife underworld hell of cartoons and Pixar movies, which is different than any of those other hells. So first we kind of talked about all the different ways hell can appear in our world. Now notice I haven't even started talking about Dante in the 14th century in Italy or any of that crap yet. And here's what I can promise you. If I started my class with the textbook, if I started a week ago with this and the actual Italian poetry, no, that wouldn't have worked for me. Why? Well, I'm hoping you've already watched some of the other 13 videos leading up to this, and you know what I'm up to when I'm teaching. I have a very intense pedagogy. I actually believe in what I'm doing, and what I'm doing is teaching poetry from the point of view of a poet. The other thing I'm doing is I'm not just interested in the student, I'm interested in the human in the student. I really mean that. The unique thing about you and me is and I'm talking to you as a teacher, the unique thing about us is we know when our relationship is going to end with these students. Like it's very finite. But see, my relationship and my thoughts about that student don't end there. And honestly, 90% of what I'm doing is preparing my student for after they get out of our short time together. I want my students to not fear literature. I want my students to maybe even become poets. I want my students to engage with poetry in their life. I want my students to actually be readers. I don't need my students to learn how to answer a multiple choice test. Okay, I don't need students to write some essay in some highly prescriptive, non-creative way. That's not what I'm after. All right. So the first thing we did the Heldar. We did Welcome to Hell. Then I had them find a song. I had them go to their phones, to their Spotify, their Apple Music, their YouTube Music, or wherever they hear music. And I had them search for songs that had hell or hell adjacent language in them. So when they found their lyrics that had hell from a song they already like, a song they're already listening to that's already on their phone, I had them write down a couplet. So I taught them what a couplet was, 2 lines of poetry. I taught them about what a rhymed couplet was. We started to talk about end rhymes. So here in the beginning of my class, I'm starting to talk about some of the most basic musical techniques in poetry, such as end rhyme. So then I had them type their couplet with the hell or hell adjacent word onto a Google Doc. And I had that Google Doc set up with all the different vowel sounds. So we talked about kind of those softer vowel sounds versus those harder vowel sounds. That old upside down E, that schwa came into the conversation. I started talking about diphthongs. That seemed pretty technical. I just wanted students to see if they could identify the sounds at the end of their lines from their song, if they could identify that sound and then be able to make a rhyme ostensibly or understand what another sound would be to correlate with that. So it was enough for me already. Already that's like 5 days of class just to get where I'm at right now telling you about. And that was enough to me. We were laughing, we were joking, we were having fun, we were smiling. Somebody told me that there's this book called Teach Like Finland, 33 Simple Strategies for Joyful Classrooms by Timothy D. Walker. I guess this guy, Timothy D. Walker, used to teach in America and then he went to Finland and he's like, oh, dang. They're actually searching for joy over here. And I guess that book has a lot to do with like aiming for joy in your classroom. Those of you that have watched my previous videos, you know that that's also my thing. I'm not saying he stole it from me. I just think it's just bubbling up right now. Kind of like how algebra rose 2 different places in the world at the same time. It just kind of bubbled up at the right time. That's where we're at as educators with joy. And if you haven't like realized that joy is a necessity in your class, maybe you will. Maybe you never will. But there's some people out here like me and Timothy D. Walker. We both have name as Tim as the first name. You don't have to be named Tim to have joy in your classroom, all right? So like I'm also looking for joy, and that's my thing too. So I know where we're headed. We're gonna get to this ancient text from the 1400s from Dante. We're getting there. Then the next day I had contrapasso up on the board. We got a Latin word up there. I describe contrapasso. I talk about the idea that contrapasso has to do with a punishment that is either a reflection or a contrast to the sin. I wrote 9 sins on the board and I said, all right, I'm gonna imagine you guys, or I'm gonna let you imagine that you are in charge of hell. And you are in charge of hell's punishment. So I want you to pick some of these sins and come up with a contrapasso punishment. And so I gave them the opportunity to do as Dante did, to use their imagination and come up with some biblical fan fiction. I had them do that, just as Dante did. So again, going back to my pedagogy, like I even started this video with, how to teach poetry? Have them try to write similar poetry as the poem you're about to study, which is what I did, right? So now they know what contrapasso is. How do they know? They did it themselves. They came up with some punishments. Then the next day, the next 45-minute day period, I went on a little summary of Dante's Inferno. Like I just sort of summarized some of my favorite parts. I did not feel it necessary for them to take notes. I did not feel it necessary to go into every single part. And the first circle and the second circle and the third, like I sort of like scratched the surface. Like, hey, I told them some of the punishments, like I like the punishment for lust, and I thought the punishment for suicide is especially unique. I like the lust punishment in Inferno and the suicide punishment because both of them involve monsters. Lust has that 3-headed dog called Cerberus. Suicide, you're at a tree and those harpies be picking at your leaves. I like that. So I'm talking about harpies. I'm talking about 3-headed hell dogs. And then here we go. Now we're on our last day of this Inferno unit. I'd say I did my Inferno unit in like maybe 7 class days. So now we're at the last day and I say, all right, we've been having fun. We've been looking at modern culture. We've been having our Heldar on, but now we're going to do the heavy lifting. And I turned on some additional lights. I made it even a different atmosphere in my room to signal to them with a nonverbal cue that we're going to ramp it up now. We're going to really put on our thinking caps. We're going to go high end here, and we're going to engage with this thing. Now, you might be saying, oh, and then did you read it out loud, or then did you push play on a YouTube video of somebody reading out loud? Absolutely not. I absolutely did not do that. You know why? Because every single one of your students reads at a different pace. You know why? Because they're individual humans. No humans read all at the same pace. So this idea of a teacher reading and everybody's supposed to be at the same pace, it's nonsense. It's just insane. How is that differentiating your instruction? And so what I did is, and I didn't set any timers. I said, all right, I set him up. I told him who Judas was. We reviewed Cassius and we reviewed Brutus. We talked about that crazy thing that happens at the end of Inferno where the whole world shifts at 180. You know, I talked about that. I gave them a couple little things to look for. And then I said, okay, guys, read it. And look, in our textbook here, it's just 4 pages. It's just this last canto, Canto 34. That's all it is 4 pages translated into English. And I told them, I'll know when you're done when you start looking up and fidgeting with your phone. That's how I'll know you're done. So then I sat at my desk and I patiently waited till I saw the majority of them looking up from the text. And I think it went really, really well. Immediately what I ask anytime after we read anything in here, whether it be ancient poetry or modern poetry or whatever, my first question is, did you like it? Did you like it? And I think that's the most important question you can ever ask a student. Because if they learn to like literature, then it's possible that after they get out of your class, they might actually read for their life. And isn't that part of what you're wanting out of them? So, man, a couple kids liked it in each class. In 2025 in southern New Mexico, a couple students, like 2 out of 30 every class, they would have read this anyway. They liked this stuff. And then, the way we finished is I showed a couple minutes of the 1911 Dante's Inferno movie where they do the same scene. So y'all, I don't want to keep on rattling on. I feel like that's what I did. That's all my secrets. We're done with Dante's Inferno now. In the whole school year, we'll probably go into this textbook once or twice. But the last thing I'll leave you with is most students don't enjoy Dante's Inferno. I would argue that most students did enjoy Dante's Inferno in my class because I led with joy. The other thing that I did to make sure that my students would enjoy the text is I removed all the typical barriers associated with joy, such as vocabulary words, such as essays, such as quizzes, such as tests. I'm not saying you can't have a test, but if you are looking for joy and you associate literature with a test, you've removed the joy. Okay, I don't teach an AP course. I'm not talking about AP or honors here. I'm in general education, Southern New Mexico. To me, I'll choose what pace I go because I have joy in my mind and that's what I'm going for. Y'all, that's all I got. Thank you so much. Happy teaching, sweet folks.